Hello, you are listening to NPE Stories. This is a podcast where NPEs can share their story. I am your host, Lily, and I found out I was an NPE through an Ancestry DNA test that changed my life forever. NPE is a term that stands for Not Parent Expected or Non-Paternal Event. This means that one or more of our parents are not who we believe them to be. NPE Stories is a podcast where NPEs can share their story of what their original family was like, how they found out they were an NPE, and what their journey has been like since the day they found out. And welcome to episode 129. This will be the last episode of season 3. Season 4 will come out in August of 2022. And I will bring in my guest right away. Today we are speaking with Lisa. Hi, Miss Lisa.
Hello.
We will be referring to this episode as Maria's story because that is what is on your birth certificate, correct?
Yes.
How do you say your name? It was beautiful.
Maria Alicia.
Maria Alicia. Beautiful. All right,
Thank
Miss
you.
Lisa, thank you so much for doing this today. Why don't you go ahead and start with your family of origin and who's in it?
I grew up in California, and I'm Hispanic, and I grew up in just a middle class family, and with my mom and my dad and my brother. Yeah, that it just was. I mean, there's a lot more to the besides the finding out and that I'm an NPE, but I had a rough childhood as well.
Childhood. Feel free to, we can leave it as that, or if you want to share any more about it, that's up to you.
I grew up just like I had told you before, I'm going through an awakening, things are being revealed to me lately. And so, I grew up in an abusive home as a child. So, there was a lot of, as I grew up, I always knew that I was different. Didn't know what it was, but I just knew I was just different. And I remember listening to stories like that through other NPs, and that was one of the things that it was like, wow, a lot of people of us, we have that in common where we always felt different.
Were your parents together?
Yes. Yeah. My parents were together. And I am a product of an affair that my mom had. And so it was, it was a really weird kind of, the way it all happened, because it was a man that was married to my aunt. And so I actually knew my biological father my whole life. But I just didn't know that he was my father. My mother, basically, it was my mother had an affair with my dad's sister's husband. I know that kind of gets, if you think about it. So, yeah, so my dad, who I thought was my dad, his sister, it was her husband. And so I not only thought that his kids were my first cousins, but in fact, we were actually half siblings. So we grew up together down the street from each other. And it was very traumatic, because when I did my DNA test, just out of not knowing that, not because I had like any, suspicion or anything like that. It was because at the time I did this 3 years ago, my work was doing it. And so I thought, oh, how fun, I want to know what my pie chart is, that's pretty cool. And I ended up, thinking about it. And I ended up buying the test and doing the test, and it came on January 12th, 2018. I remember sitting on my couch and things didn't add up. I knew a couple of relatives that had did it, but they weren't showing up on my matches. And at first I didn't understand the matches. I just thought it was just the pie chart. And so I started to look through the matches and notice, okay, this doesn't add up. This doesn't, this is not right. And so I did a little more digging, and it matched me with this guy that lived down another town from me in Davis, California. And I reached out to him and I said, it says we're first cousins and I don't really know who you are. I still didn't even get it. I thought, okay, well, I mean, I know all my first cousins. And so maybe I'm not really sure why, who he is. So I just dig deeper, and he ended up contacting me back, and he was telling me who his mom and his dad were, and his mom's name sounded familiar, but I didn't recognize. He had a picture, and I didn't really recognize the picture because I didn't know her. And then I screenshotted it, and I went to my mom, and I said, "Who's this lady?" And she says, "Oh, that's, her name's Gloria." And I says, "Okay, who is she?" "Well, she's at the time we'd call my biological father uncle, but I mean, he was an uncle through marriage because he married my dad's sister. And that's his sister." And I says, "Okay, well, why is it saying we're related?" And my mom denied it. And we didn't talk for a week. My mom always calls me every day, and I knew something was going on because you could just tell. She was like, "Oh my goodness, this is out now. This is," she just felt panicky. And so I waited a week, and I actually reached out to who I thought was my cousin, but actually is my half brother. And they actually, it's the cousins that I grew up with that are my siblings. There's 3 of them. There's 2 boys and a girl, and the girl, she was 9 years older than me. So we weren't really close because there was a big age gap because she's the oldest. But throughout our whole childhood, everybody would always say, "You look like sisters. You look like, that's your sister?" "No, she's my cousin. We're first cousins." And I would explain, "Yeah, my dad and her mom are a brother and sister. That's why we look alike." Mm-hmm. And so even at family reunions, we giggle. "Oh my goodness, they always, they always call me your name," and, vice versa. And so we never put 2 and 2 together because, well, we're supposed to look alike. We thought, because my dad and her mom were brother and sister. And so I didn't reach out to her, but I reached out to my my cousin that I thought, and he was kind of like, "Wait a minute, this is crazy." And I said, "Well, this is my test. This is what's coming back. And who's this lady?" And, "Well, that's my aunt." And I said, "Yeah, that's your aunt on your dad's side of your family. Why is she related to me? She shouldn't be related to me. She should be related to you because of your dad." Yeah. Then finally, my mom finally confessed. She was very upset that this came out. She was upset that I took the test. And she said that this was supposed to be a secret that was going to go to her grave. And I said, "Oh, well, that's not what, I'm glad it came out." And so then I proceeded to ask her, "Well, does he know? Does he know about me?" And she said, yes, he knows." And I'm like, "Oh my, what? Are you kidding me?" And she goes, "Yeah." And I go, "So you both knew from the beginning?" And she goes, "Yes, but we, too many people would have gotten hurt. We couldn't tell anybody, And I go, and my dad passed away in 2004. So he was gone, and then his sister actually passed away like 5 years ago. So if anything, this was, I guess, the right time for it to come out. The 2 people that probably get hurt the most are no longer with us. And so I said, I just can't believe that this is happening, And she just proceeded to try to make me not say anything. "We got to keep this a secret." And I said, "Oh no, we're not doing that. No, I said, "No, if you want to be in my life, then you're just going to have to deal with this." And I go, I don't know how to take all this, but I just need you to tell me the truth. And, and she said that it was, a one night stand, and it was something that they knew that shouldn't have happened. And and then I ended up calling him, and that was really awkward, but he was more on the relieved side. Like, he was relieved that I found out, because he's a lot older than my mom, so he's getting up there in age. And he says for the last 10 years he's been wanting to get the truth out. And so he was relieved. He was like very relieved. And, we went to breakfast and we talked about it. And he was just like, I've been wanting to tell you, but your mom didn't want to. And, but vice versa. But it was like really shocking, because you don't know who you are, your identity. I just remember staring in the mirror like, who are you? It was crazy.
Complete identity crisis you go through when you find that out.
Oh, it's such a weird feeling, because you almost feel like you're, I don't know, like you don't know who you are, and you just feel numb. And plus I've had a really traumatic childhood. So then on top of that, it was like, wow, now what? It was very traumatizing.
Oh yeah. So your birth father is your uncle by marriage, and then
Yes.
your cousins are actually your half siblings. And
Yes.
they
Yeah.
all three of them are now aware that you are their sibling.
Yes. Yeah, they are all aware. And the youngest, his youngest son, and him and I are only a year apart. So we went to school together. Yeah, I'm a year older than him. So it just, it's just crazy, because we're, like, it's easier for the two boys to, it's almost kind of like they're like, I've always loved you, but now you're like my sister. Now it's like a deeper kind of love, and we keep in contact more now than we did as cousins. And my sister, she's had a harder time with the whole, and she still does, not with me, but with her father. She's just because she's had a hard relationship, I guess. That's what she says. She wasn't close to her father. She was really close to her mother. And so she has a lot of, I guess, bitterness and maybe resentment. And so they're working through it, of course. But this kind of set her back, she said. Not with me, I mean, but with her father.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's amazing, because with me, it's kind of like, I'm like, did he so I remember when I was about 11 or 12 years old, and, I had like a flashback of him coming over to our house. And my parents divorced when I was 8. So my dad had moved out of the city and where he was from. And he lived around the corner from us. And I remember I was going through a tough time. I think I must have been like 12, 13, but I started to have issues with eating disorders. And I remember him coming over, and I don't know if my mom called him because she was worried, but I remember him coming over and telling me, you can't, you got to do this, trying to be like, I guess, a parent. I just remember sitting there quietly thinking, what are you doing here? Why are you telling me stuff? What, you're not my dad. What are you doing? I just remember feeling that way. And now I look back and I was like, oh, well, now that makes sense. It's crazy. It's just, I don't know. And that's what I tell them. I don't know how you guys knew and not even wouldn't say anything, or it was a cover up. And it's almost like they don't think about what it's doing to the child.
And I know you felt different, and you start rethinking your whole childhood
Oh,
and
goodness.
Do you, other than the time when your uncle slash birth father came over to talk to you, can you think of any other clues or times that you?
No, he stayed away. He didn't, he wasn't, no, that's the only really time. And then if I saw him at family functions, and he actually even asked me, did you have any idea or did you? I said, absolutely not. I had no. And then I shared with him, well, actually, I remember you coming over. I think I was 13 and you were giving me like a talk that like a parent would talk to a kid. But I just remember in my mind thinking, what, why are you here? I just remember thinking that. And he's like, wow. And he just proceeded to, every time when I first actually had breakfast with him, he was very, it was a shock for me because he had pictures. He just started showing me pictures of his parents and, these are your grandparents. And it was just a big shock because it was like, I don't, do you realize that this is new for me? I know you've known your whole life, but like, I don't know. I don't know if he thought that I was going to be excited to see these pictures of his family.
Hmm.
But it was just odd. It was really awkward. And it was so weird because his sister he has a big family. He has like, let me see, two brothers. And then is it five sisters, I think. One of them I didn't meet because she had passed already. And that was the one that I found on the Ancestry DNA. Her son linked us together. But his sister comes and she's like, hey, brother. And we're sitting there eating breakfast. And I was just like, my heart just started pounding me. And she's looking like, who is this girl? And I looked at him and I looked at her and he just was like, kind of like, well, I'm going to tell you now because it's going to come out eventually. This is my daughter. And she just like was like, what? I mean, she was so shocked. And she hits him on the shoulder and she says, brother, like that. And I just said, it's okay. It's okay. I took my DNA test and this just came out. And she's like, well, who's your mom? And I said, told her who my mom was. And who, and my dad is this. She goes, oh, I know your dad. And then she looks at him and she's like, what? She was just shocked. And she goes, well, and then she changed. She says, well, I'm your aunt, your Thea, or, and she's like, it's so nice to meet you. And looks like we're going to have to talk about this. I'll leave you guys alone. And she left. And then I was like, oh my goodness. And he said, you know what? We have to tell his kids. We have to, because the sisters, she was like, I guess, going to go tell the other sisters and it was going to get out. And so, it was so weird to run into her at that breakfast. And so I was really worried because they didn't know, his kids didn't know yet, which were at the time I thought were my cousins. So I quickly reached out to them and told them. And so then I went and talked to my sister, and that was really hard because I was like, I don't know. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. I just kind of told her I did my DNA test, and you know why we look so much alike? It's because we're sisters. That's why. And it's just really weird because we look like twins, and I actually look just like my biological father. And so now meeting his sisters, I guess now they were like, we were always suspicious, but we didn't say anything. Like if you could come over to the house and we were there, that she said that her mother, which is my biological father's mother that I didn't get to meet, I guess my grandparents, that she happened to look at me and say, that's my granddaughter. They were like, okay. And so that kind of bugged me too, because then I'm like, here I'm just little kid where everybody's kind of whispering these secrets, or like these like, like, oh my gosh, that looks just like Joe, that's, how you see that. I mean, I've seen that before in people where it's like, that kid doesn't look nothing like the dad, and so I'm like, I started thinking, wow, I was one of those kids that people were just looking at, talking about. and so it's crazy. And come to find out that my aunt, my dad's sister, she actually was suspicious because she asked one of my dad's other sisters, do you think that she's, my husband's daughter? And my aunt was, no, no, that's not the case. And so I always grew up not, I did, everyone always would say, you don't look like your mom or your dad or your brother. You look, I was always that. And when I was with my dad, he would always introduce me as his daughter, but everybody would always laugh and say, that's not your daughter. That's not your daughter. And I remember thinking, why everyone keep saying that? So I asked my dad, I said, why does everyone keep saying that when, and he says, oh, it's because you look like your mom. You look like your mom. That's why you look like your mom's side of the family. So then I started thinking, did my dad know?
Yeah.
And, my mom says, no, no, he didn't know. He had, no, no, no. And because he never once, my dad he loved me so much. He would always call me his number one daughter. Where's my number one daughter? I mean, he was very, very loving, and his sense of humor, he always made me laugh, not once did I even think that. He never made me feel that way, ever. I was his daughter, and that was that.
Yeah, so he
And
definitely did not know.
yeah, so I don't think he knew either, um so yeah, it's been, that the first year was just tough because you go through all these thoughts, and a lot of things make sense though at the same time, because you look back and you're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And for my mom and we never got along, you know. I was like the scapegoat. My brother was the golden child. And so I always now I talked to her, I said, I can understand why I felt like you hated me. I was probably a constant reminder of what you did. And she's like, no, no, that's not it. That's not it. I go, yeah, I remember yelling at her as a teenager. And I even told her, I said, do you remember? I go, I used to always yell at you, say, why did you have me? I used to tell her that. Why did you have me? And I go, and I remember her she would just look at me and walk away. She wouldn't say anything. And so, I asked her now, like we talked about it, and she's like, I go, how'd you feel when I would say that to you? I didn't know that I wasn't, I didn't know what had happened, or who I was. And she goes, I just felt like God was punishing me. And I said, well, she said, I just felt like somehow you knew. I go, well, maybe subconsciously I did.
I know you said your mother was unhappy with you when you'd taken that DNA test. I think a lot of our mothers were, even though we were, completely blindsided ourselves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how did that ever play out? How is that going with your mom now?
She's, I think she's getting better because I'm putting boundaries. She was like, no one can know, you can't tell anybody, and I'm like, no, sorry, either you're going to be in my life and deal with this, or you're not. And so then she's like, okay, I'm all she has in this world, basically. My brother, through the traumatic childhood he experienced, I mean, he's in prison. He's I don't know when he's going to get out. I mean, it's so weird how, you know, she really, and I did too. I really looked up to him. He's very smart. I mean, he's, I've always looked up to him, but my mom, like I said, with being the golden child, he was like, he was put on this pedestal, and I was kind of like, I got the, I got the abuse more, but it turned him into somebody bad as well. So, I'm all she has. And so it's like, look, I'm not going to go along because in our relationship, it was like, you don't talk about any abuse. You don't talk about, no, you don't tell other people. You just internalize it. And my mom's done that her whole life. But also my mom's had a tough, she's had a tough upbringing herself. She came to this country when she was 15 and didn't know anybody. And so, she's learning, when I tell her, no, I'm not going to do that, or no, she'll say stuff like, okay, well, just don't tell people in Mexico where her family is, because they won't understand. And, you don't want to call, you want them to hate me, stuff like that. I'm like, Mom, do you think that they don't do that over there? I go, it happens all the time. Mm-hmm. And then she's kind of opened up about her experience, which was kind of shocking. She's never told me this, but she said, my dad, that happened to me when I was a little girl, and I knew this boy in the same town, and we were becoming friends, and my grandma pulled me aside and said, that's your brother. That's your half brother. Mm. And so she was like, what? And so her dad did this. Her dad, I guess, had an affair or had affairs. And this boy in the same town was actually her half brother. Mm-hmm. But you just don't talk about it. You don't say anything. I'm like, well, see, I go, see how that, you see? I just want to, help other people dealing with it. And if anybody needs, to communicate with me, I would be more than happy to help talk about it. Because I know that really helped me, is to talk about the similar experiences. Because then you don't feel like you're crazy, right?
Yeah. Yes. If so, you're willing to have people reach out to you. If people wanted to get in contact with you, how could they do that?
Oh, yeah, they can contact me through email. My email is Lisa, L-I-S-A-T, as in Tom, 1270 at sbcglobal.net. And they can contact me. And I'd be more than happy to, help them through the process of or whatever. Just talking about it is healing. Did you also have a little Facebook page you wanted? I do. It's, and I'm not on there. I'm trying to, it's in the works where I'm on there every day, but if somebody contacts me, I could give them that as well. Okay, no problem. Yeah. No problem. I know you said you've had an awakening, and you've been working on your Definitely. Healing. Yes. Absolutely. Well, yes. Before I close, is there anything else you wanted to add? I just wanted to add, you guys are not alone. We're not alone. And, I'm glad for this, the NPE Facebook. And I mean, I was really feeling lost. And so I'm super grateful for the community of, all the stories that I listen to. It just totally makes sense for me, and I don't feel alone. And so, we just got to be there for each other. We're not alone. Thank you, Lisa. Yes, it's true. I mean, if this had been like 20 years ago, we wouldn't, do you know how hard it would be to find like a supportive group or therapist or an online forum or podcast? I mean, you'd just, no, you'd be I don't know. Yeah. Yep. There's so many people that don't have passed and not known. I mean, almost that was almost me. I'm 51 now, but at the time I was 48, and it just makes it you find all the answers that you need that were in your head, now it makes sense. So you can move on. Thank you, Lisa, so much for sharing. You're welcome. Today. And this will wrap up season 3 of NPE Stories, and we'll be back for season 4. Lisa, you have a great day. It was so nice to talk to you. You too, Lily. Thank you so much. These stories are here for us to identify with. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, email npestories@gmail.com. You do not have to give any identifying information. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, I'd like to hear from you. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more. Come heal with us.